Шановні колеги, ми
Dear colleagues, we continue our working day, and the next briefing is dedicated to the topic evolution of consciousness, the integrated view of the situation in Ukraine and the world. And our guest is Bence Ganti, clinical psychologist, psychotherapist, author of the transformation method integral flow experience, and Ms. Kateryna Yas'ko, director of the CEO Vidkryta Hata, member of the public council at the Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Thank you for your interest to the topic which we are going to discuss today. We are very proud and glad to have in Ukraine Mr. Bence Ganti, our esteemed guest who arrived from Hungary, but he lived half of his life in the USA. He is a very interesting person and great professional working with transformations and the approach and model and practices and technologies. He is going to represent today. They would be very useful in Ukrainian context because Ukraine is now undergoing in deep crisis, not only economic and political one, but also it reflects in the consciousness of people and psychological aspects of transformation. They are also very important for understanding how to move forward for Ukraine to make this breakthrough, which is very important in next several years. We should view the situation from integral perspective, and one of such techniques which can help one of technologies is an integrated approaches and spiral dynamics, and today we would like to dedicate this talk, this interactive talk with Mr. Bence to communicate the main principles and concepts, what we can do, what practices, what methods, what social technologies to use to assist people to grow, to mature, and to cope with crisis situation which are present in our societies. And I am giving the floor to Mr. Bence Ganti so that he tell us about his integrated approach and Ukrainian context in particular.
Tell us about the integral approach and your work in the world. And my next question would be about Ukraine. You've been staying in Ukraine for the past 3 days, and you've given few lectures. What did you notice, and what is, in your opinion, could be helpful of what integral could bring to Ukraine, and what kind of use Ukrainians could have due to these social technologies that you're working with?
Yes, so hello everyone, and thank you so much for the introduction for this show. And integral theory brings order in the chaos, more likely to say into complexity, because by the 21st century the world reached such a complexity that hasn't been there before, and today we are living in a global era. Even if we are living in a local country like Ukraine, Germany, the USA, we cannot think anymore just locally. We have to think globally. And now there is multiple value systems present in all the societies. 100 years ago there was less value system present. 500 or 2,000 years ago, there was much less way of thinking present, so it was easier to figure out how to live together and who should be in power. And now there are so many different approaches that this is a complexity that was calling for a theory, for an approach that can understand and handle and manage this complexity. And this is the integral theory. And the integral theory is rooted in developmental psychology because already in the 1930s, psychologists, researchers started to see that there is multiple stages of development. Just to use the common sense without any psychological knowledge, we can see that a newborn is different than a 5-year-old child. A 5-year-old child is different than a teenager, and a teenager has different capacities than a 50-year-old man or a wise 70-year-old grandma, right? So there are stages of development psychologically in life. Now, you should ask, what does it have to do with politics, society? Come on, you know. Politics is about business, arranging, managing issues of the external world, and psychology is something hobby for those who are interested in themselves. No, this is not the case anymore. We have understood by the end of the 20th century that these stages of development are so essential that it completely determines our lives and our relationships, even our political and societal views. Now, you might wonder, why are we talking about stages for adults? They are not kids anymore, right? They are adults. But what is so interesting, and research shows, that developmental stages of childhood and adolescent and early adulthood, later adulthood, are layers of the self inside. So each of us can go into moments of the day, or we call it ego states or self states, where we are using our previous layers of the self from previous stages. And what is even more interesting, that the different approaches in society are just the manifestations or projections of these inner stages. Psychologists have also found in the 1960s that the rational adult state of mind that we thought is the maximum of development in the 20th century, we thought that the rational scientific mind is the top of evolution. From the 60s, both experience and research shows that it is not the top of development. There are even further human potentials, higher stages of evolutionary development of humans. And since that time, at least 2 or 3 newer developmental stage was identified, discovered. And that's why these newer stages are there, the rational stage is there, and before the rational stage there were the traditionalist, patriotic, states of mind that is also there. And even before the traditional patriotic, there is more like the warlords, the impulsivity, the one personal power leadership style of gangs and smaller units of society with aggression that is also there. So with the understanding of the stages of development, we can understand what's going on in the society, and we can better figure out and manage how to connect these different groups together and how to integrate.
Just to clarify, what you're saying, can we make a conclusion that we could see the Ukrainian society through the lenses of different levels of consciousness, and we could actually define what is going on in the east of Ukraine in terms of consciousness, why there are some difficulties in terms of social integration with other regions, and the same thing about the west or south or the capitals? Do we, can we also make transformation consciously in case we really want to integrate the country?
Yes, you are right in that. we can track that which regions or which groups of the society are operating from which level of consciousness. And it's very important to understand in integral thinking that all level of consciousness is good. So we don't say that the higher stages are good and the lower stages are not good. Each stage has its sacred value that should be respected and should be understood. And an integrated approach, we try to communicate with each other across the different groups and find these inner values and create integrative solutions for a society where each value system has its place. Now, each stage of development has its good side and bad side. And if we see a lot of the bad sides, unfortunately, we are suffering from that. But each level has also its good side or bright side, that's why evolution has created them, to make life better on that particular era when it was dominant. So we need to simply use the good sides of the stages and minimize, reduce, or if we are able to completely let go of the destructive side of the different stages. That's a very mature approach if we can do that. And
can you elaborate a little bit on the stages?
Yes, I'm very happy to do so. So, first of all, we can think about the stages as a spiral. This chart shows this concept. It's also called spiral dynamics as a good metaphor, that it spirals up from the ancient times to the present times, and it's present in the whole globe. So if we look a little bit more into the details of the stages, we see 9 stages in this chart. And the first stage started 100,000 years ago. We call it beige. We labeled the stages with colors for easier understanding. We could say number 1, number 2, number 3, but using colors is just more enjoyable and easier to remember. So the beige color, beige like the sand in African tribal lands, that's the instinctive stage of development. It's all about survival. So those people, those communities used to be or are presently in the beige stage, who are about surviving the day, getting the food from nature, making sure that by the end of the day they have a warm place to stay. So needless to say, today there is not really a full society operating. This was more like the caveman era. But today, for example, in war zones, when a city is bombed and people are on the street and they have nowhere to go and they stand there traumatized and they don't know what to eat, what to drink, where to sleep. They don't even know if they are going to be killed in the next hour. That's beige. So yes, we have beige situations today, like Syria, Aleppo, and probably Eastern Ukraine, war zone in a village, in a battlefield, which just has been shot and hit. There can be hours, days, period of beige occurring. And if people got into that state of mind, then they cannot think anything else. So we know from this famous psychologist Maslow, from the Maslow pyramid, that this need has to be fulfilled before people can again go to higher thinking in an organization.
So what's next?
Next is purple. Purple appeared 50,000 years ago in human history. It's the tribal magical world where the metaphor is the magical enchanted forest. So let's think about a rainforest tribe that lives in unity, in harmony, and there is not much differentiation of the individuals. Basically, the tribe operates as one unity. And typically a shaman figure, and there's the spiritual leader, and the chief of the tribe is guiding the whole tribe. and we call it purple meme. Today, the purple in real society, let's say Ukraine, is family bonds, clans, regions. So if you feel that you irrationally bond emotionally to someone or to a family or to a larger family, a clan or region, that we call that the purple bond. Belonging, attachment, that's purple. And when I say irrational, it's not a bad thing. It means that I don't have to have any reason. I love you simply because of an emotional connection to you. That kind of connectedness, belonging, love, that's purple. And that's how these tribes used to be binded together in the old times. Now red, the next stage of development, appeared 10,000 years ago in human history approximately. And this is the impulsive, egocentric stage. The metaphor is the jungle with wild animals where everybody has to survive and only the strongest will survive. Who is not enough strong will die. And people, just like animals in the jungle, will fight each other, and who fights the strongest will be the leader, and whoever becomes the leader will keep his leadership with power, with force. There is no structure here, no higher structure or order, no rules of society that keep the peace. It's before that. It's basically one heroic leader with emotional attitude to its colleagues, so to say, threatening, stick and carrot practices. So if you are loyal, I reward you, but if you betray me, I kill you.
How can we apply it to Ukraine?
Well, Ukraine has a lot of red, actually, and Eastern Europe also has more red than Western Europe. It means there is more aggression, anger, impulsivity, which is very good if you want a revolution, actually, because revolutionary energy is red, which comes when the system is stuck, when in a systemic level things doesn't work anymore. Then we need the red energy to break that into a part. We need the red courage and leadership. But then we need to move on. A society shouldn't stuck in the red level because life cannot be sustained for long with red. There will be always killing and revenge and killing and revenge and threatening and fear. So the good news of red is the dynamism, is the power, is the renewal aspect. The bad news of the red is aggression. So the next stage in humanity appeared 5,000 years ago approximately, the authoritarian system, where order comes, where control of all the society comes by one power. So that's when humanity produced the kings, first the god kings, like in the ancient civilizations, the leader, the pharaoh in Egypt was the god at the same time. Later it separated. In the medieval Europe there were the kingdoms, but there is basically one ruler who opposes, creates a hierarchical structured order to the full society, and that leader is usually long-term, unchanging, stable, and all the roles and positions in that society are also stable and long-term. So the good news, there is organizedness, there is peace, there is order in society. You just have to keep the rules and the roles, and there is peace. So today, this is traditionalism, patriotism in Ukraine. Also, the church operates in this, we call it blue level, the fourth stage of development. Bureaucracy is also like that, and traditional school system is also a blue order. So that was a huge development after red eras of humanity. Only blue can produce mass production only blue can bring a full society coordinated, synchronized, and organized. And socialism and the Soviet Union was also a blue structure. So all the Eastern European countries and Central European countries like Hungary, Poland, etc., Ukraine, Russia, was mostly under a blue regime with some red. And then humanity produced the fifth stage of consciousness, which we call orange, which is the achievist, modernist, democratic order. And it appeared 300 years ago as in a mass level. So the French Revolution, the European revolutions were all about the society trying to shake off the shackles of the blue absolutistic order and bring in personal freedom and recontract the society. How can we live together when everybody is free? There is free thinking. Each individual has the right to think on his own terms and to speak up, free speech, free press.
Democracy.
And that's where I want to get to. How to play this game. We need democracy instead of kingdoms. So that's how democracy arose and took over basically the Western world by the 20th century. And the normal modern life is an orange life where achieving personal success, playing the game to win, taking the risk are the main values, and it's backed by scientific research. And this is the corporate world, this is the modern business world, this is Wall Street, and this is the libertarian politics. And Ukraine has that too. Actually, Ukraine's basically history now is how to get from blue to orange, how to get from traditional to modern, how to get from a red-blue combo to a democratic European, Western European conform orange culture, because orange has the very, very highly achieved values of humanity, equal rights to genders, equal rights to different ethnic groups. We don't anymore differentiate between race, color, sex. Everybody should be equal and has equal chances, and we should start to look to each other as basically one human, family. And that brings us to the sixth level, the green level, which appeared only 150 years ago. So basically, it's a very new evolutionary development of consciousness and society, and this is the communitarian, egalitarian system. This is where multiculturalism is coming from. And this puts the emphasis of inner experiences, exploring the inner self, understanding each other deeper psychologically, spiritually, and focusing on the inner oneness of people instead of the external differences. That's why green produced that kind of sensitive, multicultural approach that Europe and the United States, a layer of United States have. For example, Germany and Sweden are pretty forward thinking in this. And that's also part of the crisis now in Europe, that if you accept everyone and if you love everyone, then when red enters the scene, he doesn't return your love, but he wants to exploit you, for example. So green has to think very smart, and green also had to rethink its own value system, and that's why the next stage of evolution appeared only 50 years ago, basically, the yellow stage, which is the integrative thinking, and it's a systemic thinking. So in yellow, we start to understand, for the first time in history, we understand all the previous levels, because it wasn't seen before. This whole integral thinking is just 50 years old. We see the stages, we understand them, and we create systemic solutions how to as I said, leave out the bad part, keep the good part of the different value systems, and how to create integrative systems that has enough of all, but not too much of all the stages. And I think Ukraine has to develop that too.
Is it somehow connected to growing leaders? You mentioned systemic thinking and integral thinking. Can we say that from the earlier stages, would it be red or blue or partly orange, where Ukraine is now, that it is hard to speak the other languages from these paradigms? Do you mean that it's crucial that yellow integral leaders appear and start to use this integral universal language and propose creative solutions for growing society?
Yes, yes. We need integral leaders. And actually integral leaders, when they go to the field and work, they don't even have to use integral language. But they have to learn to use the language and the value system of the different groups that they are talking to. And they have to respect them. That's very important. On the green level, green we also call it postmodernism. The green postmodern doesn't like the previous systems because it's too narrow, unhuman, and constricted, and dreams of an egalitarian postmodern green world where everybody lives in unity, love, and things the same. That's why yoga centers are there. That's why workshops, spiritual centers are created. People go to personal growth seminars. That's where we go green. And then we keep this personal growth, but stepping to yellow, we start to respect, again, the previous levels as well. And Ukraine needs a healthy orange, needs a healthy modernization, and an international connection and fair play with the global capitalist society. But Ukraine also has deep traditions, religious traditions, regional traditions. So that has to be kept, and by respecting them, connected with the orange free market mentality. And also red energies has to be integrated into this mix. Purple belonging has to be respect. And Ukraine already has the green, sensitive, postmodern, people in it, a layer on the society, and some integralists like yourself and the institute. So it's a beautiful era, and countries like this, unlike America, countries like this have, we call it a memetic depth. They are deep because they have all these layers, all these levels from history present at the same time. These levels didn't go away for the new era. They are present, so it's multi-layered, it's deep, and the integration of these layers, that's what's the future.
How international integral community of psychologists, consultants could help in this situation?
Well, we need to call to the country experts because it's not enough to understand economics and politics, but we need to understand the interior world of people, the value systems, what they love, what they value, where are their fears, where are their hopes. So we need to invite to the country psychologists, social scientists who understand this and who work together with businessmen, with politicians, and change makers. That's also an integral thinking that society cannot be solved anymore by external issues like money and economics. That's one factor, very important factor. And same important factor is the interior human aspect, the human psychology and collective psychology, and it's time to marry that.
Tell us a few words about your work internationally.
Well, I am basically teaching integral theory and integral psychology in Europe and in the United States. And we created with some of my colleagues the Integral European Conference that happens every 2 years in Hungary, just neighboring to Ukraine. So that's where all the big thinkers of the global integral movement come together. And one of the focus of my work is this, to create spaces for the integral consciousness to arrive and to arise, and to do it in small scale, like workshops for change makers, psychologists and businessmen, to larger scales, like an international conference. And I also, like an ambassador of Integral, I connect the United States and Europe, so I'm also very enthusiastic about bringing more global links and ties, because I believe this consciousness, integral consciousness, is not mine, it's not of small groups, it's an actual awakening of humanity in a larger scale that we are part of.
We've just created this organization called International Institute for Integral Development here in Ukraine. And the first goal and the main focus of our work currently is to apply it to education. What is your opinion, how integral approach to education could help in the reform of education and in transforming the society through education?
Yes, well, it's a very good point, because children in education are often forced into an outdated form of education. The education the normal school education comes from the Middle Ages. It's stuck on the blue level, on the authoritarian, suppressive level, and we need new forms of education where individual thinking, reflective thinking, moreover, that would be orange, moreover, human sensitivity, creativity is already nurtured in the school, because the traditional school system thinks that you have to learn a certain subject, you have to tell it back, this goes on for years and years and years, and when you are an adult, you are free to do whatever you want. But throughout the years, basically, they kill out from people the freshness of orange, individual, rational, reflective thinking, and kill out from people the sensitive, loving, creative attitude and playful attitude to each other, as children. And children should combine that playful life force with the actual subjects that should be learned. I know that you are actually a great leader in this field, so if I may ask back about what do you think about integral education, because you already created programs for that.
Thanks for the question. Yes, I truly believe that what can save the country is education, and all kinds of education, not just formal education. And if we would like to make long-term investments and see sustainable results, we definitely have to start from integral leadership in education. And this is actually one of the projects that we have just prepared, and we're looking forward to get support of the international donors to try out applying integral theory and vertical developments and spiral dynamics into education, because we know the examples of very successful schools where integral approach is applied together with nonviolent communication, development of emotional and social skills of children. So basically preparing them for this green or orange, of course, in the green world. Green is, I agree, is something that brings social integration, connection, and in the situation where we're finding ourselves now in Ukraine, it's extremely important that the country gets this social fabric, social connection. And in order to achieve that, we definitely have to teach teachers, parents, and kids social skills that would allow to negotiate, agree upon important things, And I truly believe that that's where the civic society is coming from, and that's where democracy is born. Because democracy is not just the power of people, but it's a power of people that can negotiate. And that's what we have to teach to children, first of all. And we are very happy to invite you to think of some common ideas and projects for integral education, integral business, integral even country building. You can see in Ukraine, you can feel the smell of transformation, that so many things are born, and this is a very good soil to try whether such prominent and powerful social technologies as spiral dynamics and integral approach could basically give practical help to people who are now transforming the country. That's why I truly believe integral has to be taught to reformers. And I hope that one day we will be able to invite you to the country with your lecturing, not just this that we had during these days, but I truly hope that more people would be interested in developmental psychology and would be able to integrate it into their education.
I agree with you very much, and thank you for your invitation for the future. I actually admire Ukraine because I feel such an aliveness here. And some other countries in Europe are more sleepy because they got used to the system working there. There is stability, long time, so it's a little bit more sleepy. But when there is changing times and troubles and Maidan, that awakens the nation. Then people start to be more aware, more excited, more spirited to search, to look, to try to work it out. And if you watch the TV, you just get usually the bad part. What is the problem? But news reporting is usually, what's the problem? What is the conflict? But being in the country, I actually sense, an enthusiasm and the spiritedness of people, the fire of transformation. And I think the system is pretty open, so a lot of approaches can fall into this fertile ground now. So it's a chance for the country, it's a chance for Ukraine to pick those approaches, for example, the integral approach that loves people, that's pro-humane, that's humanistic, that want to give space, and flourishing for all kinds of people, doesn't want to exclude certain people because they are from different background. And in a global age, when everybody flies to different countries and there's internet, Facebook, basically, or whole consciousness is global already, you cannot regress and close down your country and region and only think about others like you and forget the rest of the world.
The market is global.
The market is global, and consciousness is also getting global.
Thank you very much. And we are happy to invite you again to Ukraine.
Okay, and thank you so much for your invite.